So in exploring some different wargaming options right now, there seems to be three dominant type systems in terms of how the rules, how the AI, how the flow, how the narrative actually gets implemented on the tabletop. For many older type of war games, if we're looking at the 80s, early 90s, there's this idea of hexes or squares. And units occupy hexes or squares. They move hexes and squares, and they interact with opposing units or terrain based on that. So you might have a very detailed, beautiful board or table with the boundaries of the hexes on there, or it could be something completely abstract. A great example, and it's an amazing war game, Ogre. You've got the Ogre tank coming at you. You've got the command post on the other side and a bunch of units. It's just a hex grid on there. It's like a battle type grid. Then you pull in from war games that are freeform, something like Chain of Command, Warhammer 40,000. Some of these are older systems from the 80s. Some of these are kind of modern systems. And you use a movement stick or you use some sort of tape measure to measure how the units move on the table. And then we kind of have a half hybrid system where you have some sort of specialized movement ruler or something to that effect figuring it out. An example, modern example, recent example would be Pacific Rim Extinction. The Jaegers and the Kaiju, they have hex bases, but they're used to pivot, and you use a ruler, a special movement tool, whether they're walking or running, to determine what's going on. X-Wing Miniatures is a perfect example of this kind of hybrid system. You're playing on a free-form type board, a Starfield, but you're putting down based on how fast you're moving or turning, what special maneuvers you want to make. It's all predetermined and locked in to a similar effect like a hex map. So what are the advantages? What is the disadvantage? And do you have a preference in playing it on there? Certainly with a hex map or some sort of defined movement system, everything is straightforward. Am I in range? Count the hexes. I'm going to shoot and I'm 18 hexes away. I'm at long range. There you go. There's no argument with that. There's no like, well, are you in range? Are you not in range? When we have terrain in a hex, there's no argument of the effectiveness of that terrain. Meaning if in a hex there's light trees and your mech is standing in that hex with light trees, you're protected by light trees. The cover bonus or obscuring rules, whatever narrative you're playing on there. A freeform type gaming table, you have to be able to improvise a little bit. Meaning if I have a group of trees on the table, but my mech is a little bit off to the left and my mech that I'm shooting with is a little bit off to the left, I don't know. Are you in the trees? Are you not? Let's take a look. Let's get down there. This does slow the game down, and it does kind of have a social contract between you and the person you're playing the game with. Are you going to give it to them? Are you going to D6 it off? Are you just going to be like, no, absolutely not? A great example was a number of years ago where in 40K, I believe it was around, I think it was 5th edition, towards the end of 5th, somewhere in there. All these editions are just smashed into my head. Maybe it was 6th edition. And they had a tank, a Land Raider tank, which is this massive, massive tank, one of the biggest tanks in 40K. And I had a las cannon, which is a pretty powerful man-portable Space Marine laser cannon. There's a good chance, not a great chance, but there's a fair chance that I'm going to put the hurt or destroy that Land Raider with that las cannon. So I got a good shot. We're playing on a wargaming table like 40K plays on, and there was a little, I'm serious, a little like lone palm tree, like this little like weird little tree, so small on there in front of the tank. So it would be like you have your car, and I take a potted plant, that's maybe like a foot high, and I put it in front of your car. And now I'm going to shoot that las cannon, and you're like, well, cover, because there's terrain in between. And it's like, well, yeah, there is, but there's no way you're obscured. But the rules say if there's cover, if there's a blade of grass in between. So if there's a little textured gaming table that we're playing on, and there's a little textured rock a 2 centimeter rock, well, obscured cover, that could come up, and it did come up. Now, okay, we were in a tournament, and there's a lot on the line, so yeah, okay, maybe you moved your tank there on purpose, maybe you didn't, you want cover. You need to make a decision. Are we going to allow it or not? I wanted to dice it off. He said no, rules as written, so okay, you got the cover on there. That becomes a little bit of a challenge with a free-form type gaming table. You have to be willing to give and take to keep the game moving and to keep it fair. A hybrid system, I believe, is kind of the best of both worlds, because you can have a setup where hexes do limit you with the movement or the rules. They're not always as dynamic, and it does kind of kill the visuals a little bit, being honest. A free-forming gaming table with everything out there looks amazing, looks absolutely amazing. But if we played with movement rulers or ways to gauge somewhat exact movement, we get the precision of the movement and shooting of a hex table, but the visual freedoms and movement freedoms of an open wargaming table. Downside is you've got to have these hex rulers, you've got to utilize them. Sometimes X-Wing miniatures isn't a problem, but sometimes if there's terrain on the table, navigating with a movement ruler could be a little bit of a pain. I mean, nothing is a foolproof system, but these are kind of the three breakdowns in terms of how those rules get implemented in wargaming. Your thoughts, the systems that you're playing right now that you're enjoying, are they hex-based, or I should say grid-based? Are they freeform, or do they involve some sort of movement device to help you?